The station floated in the darkness of space, a massive wheel of metal and glass where 12 different species gathered to discuss the future of the galaxy. Commander Jake Morrison stood at the window of the human delegation quarters, watching ships arrive from distant worlds. Some looked like crystals that caught the light of nearby stars. Others were organic, grown rather than built. The human ships looked plain by comparison, simple metal constructs with basic engines and standard weapons. That was exactly how humanity wanted it. Jake turned away from the window and checked his uniform one more time. Today was important. The Galactic Council would vote on expanding trade routes into human territory. It meant more contact with alien species, more observers watching human colonies, more chances for someone to notice what humanity was really hiding. Captain Lisa Matthews waited for him in the corridor. She commanded the Valiant, the escort ship that had brought them to the station. Her crew was on their best behavior, giving tours to curious aliens who wanted to see how humans lived and worked. Every dangerous weapon had been locked away. Every tactical display showed only civilian information. The aliens saw what humanity wanted them to see. Ready for another day of smiling and nodding? Lisa asked with a slight grin. Jake returned the smile. Always, how are the tours going? The creche representatives are fascinated by our kitchen. They can't believe we eat cooked food. I had to explain 3 times that yes, we actually apply heat to our meals on purpose. They walked together toward the council chamber. Other species moved through the corridors, some walking, some floating, some slithering. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 30 years now. In that time, they had carefully built a reputation as friendly, cooperative, and somewhat fragile compared to other species. The truth was very different. Dr. Henry Cole met them outside the chamber. He was the chief xenobiologist, responsible for studying alien life and sharing human biological data with other species. But like everyone else in the human delegation, he only shared carefully selected information. Morning, Commander. Captain, I just finished a session with the Delmar scientists. They're amazed that humans can hold their breath for several minutes. I told them it was a quirk of our evolution. Jake nodded. The Delmar came from a water world, but they needed to breathe constantly through specialized gills. The idea that humans could simply stop breathing for extended periods seemed impossible to them. They had no idea that human soldiers trained to hold their breath for over 10 minutes, or that some special operations teams could function underwater for hours with minimal equipment. The council chamber was enormous, designed to accommodate species of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. The Metadran representatives sat in their crystalline chairs, their bodies catching and refracting light. The insectoid creche clustered together in their section, communicating through scent signals that human translators could barely interpret. Ambassador Claire Hudson already sat at the human delegation desk, reviewing documents on her tablet. Claire was the public face of humanity in the galaxy. She had spent 15 years building relationships with alien diplomats, attending their cultural events, learning their customs. She spoke 7 alien languages fluently and could navigate the complex politics of the council with ease. Every species respected her and most considered her a friend. She looked up as Jake approached. The vote should go our way. I've confirmed support from 8 of the 12 species. The trade routes will open, and we'll have 6 months to prepare our border colonies for increased traffic. Any concerns? Jake asked quietly. Claire's expression darkened slightly. The Virex ambassador has been asking questions about our defensive capabilities. Nothing direct, just casual inquiries about how we protect our outer colonies. The Vrex Dominion was a predatory species, aggressive and expansionist. They had been probing human borders for months, testing response times, studying patrol patterns. Jake didn't like it, but humanity's official policy was to appear non-threatening. That meant showing limited military strength and relying on council protection. Of course, that was all theater. Every human colony had defensive systems that could reduce an invasion force to atoms. Every civilian ship had hidden weapons. Every human in space had received combat training. But the galaxy didn't know that, and humanity worked hard to keep it that way. The council session began with the usual formalities. Each species reported on their activities and concerns. The creche were expanding into a new star cluster. The Delmar had discovered a potentially habitable ocean world. The Metadren shared new breakthroughs in crystalline computing technology. When it was humanity's turn, Claire stood and delivered her report. Human colonies were thriving. Trade was good. Scientific research continued. Everything was peaceful and productive. She made humanity sound successful but not threatening, advanced but not dangerous. The vote on the trade routes passed easily. Jake watched as the council members signaled their approval one by one. Soon alien merchants and travelers would be moving through human space regularly. It would require even more careful management to keep humanity's secrets hidden. After the session ended, Jake and Lisa returned to the Valiant. The ship was one of dozens in the human fleet that orbited the station. To any observer, they looked like standard diplomatic vessels, capable of basic defense but nothing more. The reality was different. Once they were safely in Lisa's private office, she activated a privacy screen that would block any surveillance, then pulled up the ship's true specifications on a secure display. The Valiant carried weapons that violated 3 major galactic conventions. Its engines could push it to speeds that would alarm every species in the Council. Its sensors could track objects across multiple star systems. Its armor could withstand attacks that would destroy most alien warships. And every member of the crew had been trained not just in diplomacy, but in combat operations that would horrify their peaceful alien allies. "How much longer do you think we can keep this up?" Lisa asked. Jake considered the question carefully. "As long as we need to. The Council thinks we're weak because we let them think that. It keeps the peace. Nobody threatens humanity because they believe we're protected by Council treaties, and nobody realizes that we could defend ourselves better than the entire Council combined. But what if someone does find out? What if the Vrex push too hard and we have to respond? Then we follow Protocol Omega," Jake said quietly. "We drop the act and show them what a Deathworld species really looks like when it stops playing nice." Lisa nodded slowly. Protocol Omega was the secret plan that every human in the fleet knew about, but hoped would never be activated. It was the switch that would turn humanity from friendly diplomats into something the galaxy had never seen before. Back on the station, Ambassador Claire Hudson met privately with a Vrex diplomat. He asked again about human defenses and she gave him the same answers as always. Minimal military presence. Reliance on Council protection. Nothing to worry about. The Vrex diplomat smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Claire smiled back, keeping her expression friendly and open. Inside, she was counting the days until the Vrex made their inevitable mistake, because humanity was patient. Humanity was good at waiting. And when the time came to stop waiting, the galaxy would learn a lesson it would never forget. For now, though, the game continued. Humanity played the role of peaceful traders and explorers, hiding their true nature behind smiles and diplomatic courtesy. The act was so good that most humans almost believed it themselves. Almost. Deep in the restricted sections of every human ship, weapons waited in darkness. In training facilities on remote colonies, soldiers practiced maneuvers that no alien had ever witnessed. In government buildings on Earth, military planners updated strategies for conflicts the Council couldn't imagine. Humanity was dangerous while playing nice. But if they ever stopped playing nice, the galaxy would discover what true Deathworlders looked like when they finally stopped holding back. The alarm woke Jake Morrison from a dead sleep. He rolled out of bed instantly, years of military training overriding the drowsiness. The clock on the wall showed 3 a.m, station time. His communication device was flashing red, which meant only one thing: emergency. He grabbed the device and saw the message that made his blood run cold. New Portland colony under attack. Distress signal received 14 hours ago. No further communication. 14 hours. Jake dressed quickly and ran toward the command center. 14 hours meant the attack had happened while he was asleep, while the station was in its night cycle, while humanity's carefully maintained diplomatic facade was at its most vulnerable. The command center was already filled with people when he arrived. Captain Lisa Matthews stood at the main display, her face pale. Lieutenant Danny Foster sat at the communications station, his hands moving rapidly across the controls as he tried to raise New Portland again. "What do we know?" Jake demanded. Lisa pulled up the sensor data. New Portland reported Vrex ships entering orbit at 1400 hours yesterday. They requested immediate Council assistance per the Mutual Defense Treaty. "We received the message at SOR 200 this morning." Communications went dark 30 minutes after their initial distress call. Jake stared at the display. New Portland was a farming colony on a terraformed moon at the edge of human space. 2,000 civilians lived there. Families, children, scientists studying the moon's unique ecosystem. They had defensive weapons, of course, but they were meant to be hidden. The colonists weren't soldiers. Where's the council response? Jake asked, though he already knew the answer would make him angry. Still being debated, Lisa said quietly. Ambassador Hudson requested an emergency session 6 hours ago. They've been discussing it ever since. 6 hours of debate while human civilians died. Jake felt rage building in his chest but forced it down. Not yet, he needed to stay calm. He needed to follow protocol. He opened a secure channel to Earth. Admiral Karen Bell answered within seconds, despite the time difference. She looked like she hadn't slept either. I've seen the reports, Commander. What's the council saying? Still debating. I'm heading there now. Jake, you need to prepare for the worst. If the council doesn't act, we'll have to make a decision. Jake understood what she meant. Protocol Omega, the end of humanity's peaceful masquerade. He nodded and closed the channel. The council chamber was chaos when Jake arrived. Ambassador Claire Hudson stood at the human delegation desk, her usual diplomatic calm replaced by barely controlled fury. Around her, alien representatives argued in a dozen different languages, their translators struggling to keep up. Jake moved to stand beside Claire. She glanced at him and he saw something he'd never seen in her eyes before. She looked ready to start a war right there in the chamber. What's happening? He asked quietly. They're going to vote not to intervene, Claire said through clenched teeth. The Vrex are too powerful. Military action would destabilize the region. They want us to seek diplomatic resolution. Diplomatic resolution? The Vrex are slaughtering civilians right now. I know, but half the council is afraid of the Vrex dominion. The other half doesn't want to set a precedent of military intervention. They're going to issue a formal censure and call for negotiations. Jake felt something break inside him. For 30 years, humanity had played by the rules. They had hidden their strength. They had relied on council treaties and mutual defense pacts. They had been good citizens of the galactic community, and now when they needed that community most, they were being abandoned. Council leader Tharn called for order in his resonating, crystalline voice. The chamber slowly quieted. Tharn's species didn't have faces that humans could read, but his body language suggested something like regret. The council has reviewed the situation at New Portland Colony, Tharn announced. While we condemn the Vrex Dominion's actions, military intervention at this time would create greater instability in the region. We will issue a formal censure and open diplomatic channels to resolve this border dispute peacefully. Claire's hands gripped the edge of the desk so hard her knuckles turned white. Jake watched as she took a deep breath, then another. When she spoke, her voice was perfectly controlled, but everyone in the chamber could hear the steel underneath. Ambassador Tharn, with respect, this is not a border dispute. This is an attack on civilian population centers. Our mutual defense treaty specifically covers this situation. Humanity is formally requesting council military intervention as outlined in Section 7 of that treaty. Tharn's crystalline body shifted, refracting light in patterns that suggested discomfort. Ambassador Hudson, the council appreciates humanity's position. However, the Vrex Dominion is a major power. Direct military confrontation could lead to a larger conflict. Surely you understand that we must consider the greater good of all council species. The greater good, Claire repeated slowly. I see. So the lives of 2,000 human civilians are acceptable losses for the greater good. That is not what I said. Ambassador, but it's what you mean. Claire looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. Humanity joined this council in good faith. We have honored every treaty, paid every fee, contributed to every joint project. We have been model citizens. And now, when we invoke the one treaty that matters most, you abandon us. A Kresh representative spoke up, its translation device rendering its sent speech into standard galactic language. Humanity must understand the political realities. The Vrex are aggressive, yes, but they are also powerful. Council intervention could lead to wider war. Then what good is the council? Jake asked, stepping forward. What good are these treaties if they only apply when convenient? What good is mutual defense if it doesn't actually include defense? Silence fell across the chamber. No one had an answer. The vote came quickly after that. 10 species voted against military intervention. Only the Delmar and one other species voted in favor. The council would issue its censure, open diplomatic channels, and do nothing else. Jake and Claire walked back to the Valiant in silence. Around them, the station continued its normal operations. Aliens went about their business, unaware or uncaring that humanity had just learned a terrible lesson about galactic politics. In Lisa's office, with privacy screens active, they made the call to Earth. Admiral Bell appeared on the screen, along with the Secretary of Defense and 3 other high-ranking officials. They had been waiting. The Council refused to act, Claire reported, her diplomatic mask finally cracking. They're afraid of the Vrex. They've abandoned the treaty. Then we're done playing nice, Admiral Bell said flatly. Commander Morrison, you are authorized to activate Protocol Omega. Effective immediately, all human military assets are to reveal their true capabilities. Diplomatic restrictions are lifted. Rules of engagement are now set to full response. Jake felt the weight of those words. 30 years of careful deception ending in a single sentence. What about New Portland? Lisa asked. Colonel Ryan Phillips is already en route with the Warhammer battle group. They'll drop the pretense and hit the Vrex with everything we've got. By the time the Council realizes what's happening, New Portland will be liberated and the Vrex will be running for their lives. And then? Claire asked. Admiral Bell's expression was grim. Then we show the galaxy what humanity really is. No more hiding. No more pretending to be weak. If the Council won't protect us, we'll protect ourselves. And we'll make it very clear that attacking humanity was the biggest mistake the Vrex Dominion ever made. Jake opened a secure channel on a frequency that every human ship, station, and colony monitored. He entered his authorization codes, verified his identity through 3 different security systems, and then spoke the words he had hoped never to say. All human assets. This is Commander Jake Morrison. Authorization code Omega-77 actual. Protocol Omega is now active. Repeat, Protocol Omega is now active. Drop all restrictions. Reveal all capabilities. Rules of engagement are set to full response. This is not a drill. Across human space, from Earth to the furthest colony, the message was received. In hidden military installations, weapon systems came online. On civilian ships, secret compartments opened. Soldiers who had been pretending to be simple colonists put on armor. They had kept hidden for years. The transformation had begun. Humanity was done playing nice. Lieutenant Danny Foster looked up from his station, his young face showing a mixture of excitement and fear. Sir, we're receiving confirmation from all human vessels in the sector. They're ready, Jake nodded. Then let's go to war. The Galactic Council had made its choice. They had decided that human lives didn't matter enough to risk conflict with the Vrex. They had broken faith with the one species that had been strong, enough to destroy them all, but had chosen peace instead. Now, they would learn what happened when you betrayed a Deathworld species. Now they would see what humanity looked like when it stopped holding back. Colonel Ryan Phillips stood on the bridge of the Warhammer, watching as his ship transformed. For 15 years, this vessel had been registered with the Galactic Council as a research and exploration ship. The Council believed it carried scientific equipment, civilian quarters, and basic defensive weapons. The Council believed many things about human capabilities, and all of them were lies. Seal breaches on decks 4 through 7, Ryan ordered. Begin primary transformation sequence. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this moment, but never expected it to actually come. Now that Protocol Omega was active, years of preparation were finally being put to use. The Warhammer groaned as hidden compartments opened throughout the ship. Panels that looked like ordinary hull plating retracted to reveal weapons batteries. What the Council thought was a cargo hold split open to expose fighter launch bays. The ship's modest engine array extended, revealing secondary and tertiary reactor cores that had been concealed behind false bulkheads. Transformation complete, reported Lieutenant Amy Rogers from the tactical station. All weapons online. Fighter squadron ready for deployment. Advanced sensors active. Sir, we're reading 15 other ships in the battle group completing their transformations. Ryan allowed himself a small smile. The Warhammer wasn't alone. Scattered throughout this sector of space were vessels that the Council believed were research ships, cargo haulers, and colony transports. In reality, they were a battle group capable of taking on any military force in the galaxy. Time to New Portland? Ryan asked. 4 hours at maximum speed, replied the navigation officer. Then let's not waste time. All ships prepare for combat jump. We're going in hot. The Warhammer and its escort ships vanished from their positions in a series of spatial distortions that would have shocked any alien observer. Human jump technology was supposed to be standard, reliable, and slow. The speed these ships achieved was theoretically impossible with the technology humanity had shown the Council. But humanity had never shown the Council everything, while the Warhammer raced toward New Portland. Other changes were happening throughout human space. On Earth, Admiral Karen Bell stood in the command center that officially didn't exist, watching as humanity's true military revealed itself. "Orbital defense platforms are online," reported a young officer. "The Council monitoring stations are detecting the power signatures. We're receiving confused inquiries from the Metadron observers." Karen nodded. "Send them the standard response. Technical difficulties, routine maintenance. Keep them guessing for as long as possible." The orbital platforms that the Council believed were weather satellites and communications relays were showing their true nature. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy an invasion fleet. Earth alone had 70 of these platforms, and every major human colony had similar defenses. On Mars, in the sprawling underground facilities that officially produced agricultural equipment, production lines switched to their real purpose. Within hours, factories that had been idle for decades roared to life, beginning to produce weapons, ammunition, and military equipment on a scale that would have terrified the Council. Dr. Henry Cole stood in a secure medical facility on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. Around him, soldiers lined up to receive treatments that had been developed in secret over the past 20 years. The Council knew humans came from a harsh world. They knew human biology was remarkably resilient. What they didn't know was that humanity had found ways to enhance those natural advantages even further. "How many can we process in the first wave?" Henry asked his assistant. 5,000 this week, 20,000 by the end of the month. The treatments are stable. No significant side effects beyond the expected enhanced strength, speed, and endurance. Henry watched as the first soldier received the injection. Within minutes, the effects would begin. Enhanced muscle density, improved neural response time, increased oxygen efficiency. The soldier wouldn't become superhuman, but he would become more than any alien expected a human to be. "Make sure they understand the psychological effects," Henry instructed. "The aggression increase is manageable, but they need to be aware of it." Back at New Portland, the Vrex Dominion was learning that conquering a human colony was not as easy as they had expected. The colonists had fought back with farming equipment, tools, and improvised weapons. What should have been a quick victory had turned into a grinding battle through the colony's streets and buildings. Commander Vextal of the Vrex Assault Force was growing frustrated. His soldiers were trained warriors, equipped with advanced weapons and armor. The humans were supposed to be soft, weak, reliant on Council protection, yet these civilians had been fighting for almost a full day now, inflicting casualties that Vextal found embarrassing. "Status report," he demanded. "We control 60% of the colony, Commander, but the humans keep falling back to prepared positions. They're organized. It's like they were expecting an attack." Vextal's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Of course they weren't expecting an attack. This was supposed to be a simple raid, a message to humanity about respecting Vrex territorial claims. The Council would protest, issue a censure, and nothing would change. That was how these things always went. "Bring up the heavy weapons," Vextal ordered. "If they want to hide in their buildings, we'll bring the buildings down." But before the heavy weapons could be deployed, Vextal's sensors officer made a panicked sound. "Commander, we have multiple ship signatures entering the system. They're moving fast." "Very fast. Identification?" "They're reading as human vessels, but the signatures are wrong. Too much power. Too much mass." "Commander, these aren't research ships." Vextal felt the first stirring of concern. "How many?" 16 capital ships. Multiple smaller craft. "Commander, they're launching fighters. I've never seen human ships launch fighters before." The concern became fear. "Raise shields. Signal the fleet in orbit. Prepare for combat." The Warhammer dropped out of jump space with perfect precision, appearing directly in New Portland's orbit alongside 15 other warships. Ryan Phillips took one look at the tactical display and felt cold rage settle over him. The Vrex had 12 ships in orbit. On the ground, their forces were using heavy weapons against civilian structures. The colony was in ruins. Human life signs showed hundreds of casualties. "All ships weapons-free," Ryan said quietly. "Target their orbital assets first. I want every Vrek ship destroyed before they can escape. Fighter squadrons establish air superiority over the colony. Ground forces prepare for combat drop. Sir, the Vrek ships are attempting to flee, Amy reported. Don't let them. I want every single one destroyed. No survivors to report back what they saw here. What followed was not a battle. It was an execution. The Warhammer's main weapons fired, and a Vrek's cruiser simply ceased to exist. Human fighters swarmed the remaining ships, moving with a speed and agility that should have been impossible. The Vreks tried to fight back, but their weapons barely scratched human shields that were suddenly far more powerful than they should have been. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Vrek's orbital fleet was destroyed. Not routed, not damaged, completely annihilated. Lieutenant Amy Rogers led the first ground assault team. They didn't drop in shuttles or landing craft. They dropped from orbit in individual armored suits, hitting the ground at speeds that would have killed any other species. The impact craters they created were like bomb strikes. The Vrek soldiers on the ground turned their weapons on these new arrivals. Energy bolts and projectiles hit the armored humans but did nothing. Amy walked through weapons fire that should have killed her, raised her rifle and began firing back. Human weapons didn't stun. They didn't disable. They killed with brutal efficiency. The first Vrek soldier Amy shot literally came apart under the impact. The second died before he could even scream. The third tried to run, but human soldiers were faster than any Vreks expected. Commander Vextal watched his assault force disintegrate. These weren't the humans he had studied. These weren't the weak diplomatic species that relied on council protection. These were something else entirely. Something terrifying. He tried to order a retreat, but human soldiers were already surrounding his position. He raised his weapon, and a human appeared in front of him with impossible speed. The last thing Vextal saw was the human's armored fist coming toward his face. The battle for New Portland lasted 42 minutes from the moment the Warhammer arrived. When it was over, every Vrek soldier was dead. Every Vrek ship was destroyed. The human casualties were 3 wounded, none fatal. The colonists emerged from their shelters to find their rescuers standing among the ruins. Amy Rogers removed her helmet, showing a young woman with hard eyes and blood on her armor. "You're safe now," she told the colony administrator. "Nobody's going to hurt you again." The administrator stared at her. "What are you?" "I've never seen human soldiers like this." Amy smiled without humor. "We're what happens when humanity stops pretending to be harmless. We're what the Council should have been afraid of from the beginning." News of New Portland spread through the galaxy faster than light. The Galactic Council received reports that made no sense. Human ships with impossible capabilities. Human soldiers who could survive what should have been fatal attacks. The Vrek's Dominion made the worst decision in their species' history. Instead of backing down after New Portland, instead of recognizing they had provoked something beyond their understanding, they doubled down. Pride, arrogance, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what they were facing led them to assemble a war fleet, 50 capital ships, 300 support vessels, 70,000 Vrek's warriors. It was the largest military force the Dominion had assembled in 2 generations. They intended to teach humanity a lesson about respecting Vrek's power. They were about to learn a very different lesson. Colonel Ryan Phillips received the intelligence reports aboard the Warhammer. The Vrek's fleet was gathering near the Darwin Nebula, a massive cloud of gas and dust on the border between Vrek's and human space. They would need 3 days to complete their assembly, then another 2 days to reach human territory. Ryan studied the tactical display and smiled. 5 days was more than enough time. "Signal Admiral Bell," he ordered. "Tell her the Vreks are making this easy for us. I'm taking the battle group to Darwin. We'll end this before it starts." But Ryan's battle group wasn't going alone. Throughout human space, ships that had been hiding their true nature converged on Darwin Nebula. Mining vessels that were actually troop carriers, science ships that carried weapons laboratories, trade haulers that transformed into missile platforms. The Council's intelligence agencies watched in growing horror as they realized how thoroughly humanity had deceived them. The human fleet that gathered at Darwin wasn't just a military force. It was a statement. Every ship represented years of careful planning. Every weapon system represented technology that humanity had developed while pretending to be primitive. Every soldier represented training that went far beyond what the Council considered acceptable. Captain Lisa Matthews commanded one of those ships now, the Valiant having revealed its true purpose as a heavy assault carrier. She stood on her bridge, watching as more human vessels arrived, and felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because humanity was finally showing its true strength. Sadness because it had come to this. "Captain, we're receiving tactical briefing from the Warhammer," her communications officer reported. Lisa pulled up the briefing on her display. Ryan's plan was brilliant and ruthless. He intended to use the nebula itself as a weapon, turning the environment that the Vrex thought would provide cover into a death trap. Jake Morrison arrived at Darwin Nebula aboard a new ship. The Reckoning was a dreadnought that officially didn't exist. It was larger than any human vessel the Council had ever seen, bristling with weapons that violated multiple galactic conventions. Jake stood on the bridge of this monster and prepared to address not just the Vrex, but the entire galaxy. "Open all frequencies," he ordered. "Standard galactic broadcast. I want every species in the Council to hear this." When the channel opened, Jake spoke with calm certainty. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. This message is directed to the Vrex Dominion, but I want every member of the Galactic Council to hear it as well. Humanity tried peace. We followed your rules. We trusted your treaties. You abandoned us when we needed you most. That was your mistake. The Vrex Dominion attacked a human colony, killed human civilians, and believed there would be no consequences. That was their mistake. To the Vrex fleet currently gathering at Darwin Nebula, I offer you one chance to survive. Leave now. Return to your space. Never threaten humanity again. You have 1 hour to decide." The Vrex response came in 30 minutes. It was not a retreat. It was a declaration of war, filled with boasts about Vrex superiority and threats about humanity's coming destruction. The Vrex commander clearly believed his 50 capital ships were more than enough to crush whatever force humanity had assembled. Ryan Phillips read the Vrex response and shook his head. "They just don't understand. Amy, begin deployment. Let's set the stage." Lieutenant Amy Rogers, now promoted to captain after her actions at New Portland, commanded one of the Warhammer's fighter squadrons. She led her ships into the nebula, deploying specialized drones that would turn the cloud of gas and dust into something far more dangerous. The Vrex fleet entered the nebula right on schedule. Their sensors were partially blinded by the interference exactly as they had planned. They intended to use the cover to close with human forces before opening fire. What they didn't realize was that human sensors could see through the nebula perfectly. Ryan watched as the Vrex ships moved into position. "Wait for it. Let them get comfortable. Let them think they're safe." The Vrex fleet spread out into attack formation. Their commander broadcast a message to the human forces demanding surrender. Ryan didn't bother responding. "All ships activate plasma vents. Begin gravity manipulation. Launch kinetic strike packages. Execute pattern Delta 7. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations. The drones Amy squadron had deployed began venting superheated plasma directly into the nebula's gas clouds. The entire region around the Vrex fleet became a furnace. Vrex shields were designed to handle weapons fire, not prolonged exposure to temperatures that could melt metal. While the Vrex scrambled to respond to this unexpected attack, human ships used gravity manipulation technology that the Council didn't know existed. They created localized gravitational anomalies throughout the nebula, pulling Vrex ships off course, slamming them into each other, disrupting their formations. And then came the kinetic strikes. Human ships launched missiles that didn't carry explosives. They carried mass. Dense cores of heavy metals accelerated to incredible speeds, using gravitational slingshots around the anomalies. When these projectiles hit Vrex ships, they punched through shields and armor like they weren't even there. The Vrex tried to fight back. They fired their weapons blindly into the superheated clouds. They attempted to reform their formations. They called for reinforcements. Nothing worked. Ryan watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. "Target their command ship. Full barrage. I want them to know this is personal." The Warhammer's main batteries fired together. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and experimental particle beams struck the Vrex flagship simultaneously. The ship's shields failed instantly. Its armor shattered. The vessel broke apart in a series of explosions that lit up the nebula like a small star. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted 5 hours. When it was over, the Vrex had lost all 50 capital ships. Only a handful of support vessels escaped, and Ryan let them go deliberately. He wanted survivors to carry the message back to Vrex space. The message was simple. Don't fight humanity. You cannot win. While Ryan was destroying the Vrex fleet, other human forces were delivering similar messages throughout the galaxy. Captain Lisa Matthews led a battle group to the borders of 3 species that had voted against helping humanity. Her ships didn't attack. They just watched, silent, menacing, making it clear that humanity remembered who their friends were and who had abandoned them. On the station where the Galactic Council met, Ambassador Claire Hudson returned to the council chamber. But she wasn't asking for anything this time. She was dictating terms. The Vrex Dominion will withdraw from all disputed territories, she announced, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. They will pay reparations to the families of those killed at New Portland. They will dismantle their military infrastructure within 10 light-years of human space. These are not negotiations. These are requirements. Council Leader Tharn tried to object. Ambassador Hudson, the Council cannot simply impose terms on a sovereign species. Claire turned to look at him. The Council can't, but humanity can. We don't need Council approval anymore. We don't need Council protection. What we need is for every species in this chamber to understand that the rules have changed. She pulled up a display that showed footage from the Darwin Nebula battle. Alien representatives watched in stunned silence as human weapons tore through ships that should have been able to defend themselves. They saw technology that violated their understanding of physics. They witnessed destruction on a scale that most species had never imagined. This is what humanity looks like when we stop being nice, Claire said quietly. For 30 years we hid our true capabilities. We pretended to be weaker than we are. We followed your rules and trusted your treaties. That ends today. From now on, humanity sets our own rules. We will defend our own interests. And we will respond to any threat with overwhelming force. A Kresh representative spoke up nervously. Are you threatening the Council, Ambassador? No, I'm informing the Council of reality. Humanity doesn't want war. We don't want conquest. What we want is respect. We want our treaties honored. We want our allies to actually help when we're attacked. If the Council can provide that, then we can continue as we were. If not, then humanity will go our own way and enforce our own peace. Jake Morrison's broadcast had reached every corner of the galaxy by now. Billions of beings across dozens of species watched as this human commander calmly explained how their entire understanding of humanity had been wrong. News networks showed the footage from New Portland and Darwin Nebula on endless loops. Dr. Henry Cole found himself giving interviews to alien journalists who suddenly wanted to know everything about human biology. They asked about human strength. 6 months after New Portland, the galaxy looked very different. Trade routes that had been dangerous for centuries were now the safest in known space. Pirates who had operated with impunity for generations had either retired or died. And at every important junction, every disputed border, every potential conflict zone, human ships watched and waited. Captain Danny Foster, promoted rapidly after his actions during the crisis, commanded a patrol group along what used to be contested territory between 3 minor species. His ships were the new normal. Human vessels that no longer pretended to be anything other than what they were. Warships. Peacekeepers. The enforcement arm of a new galactic order. Sir, we're picking up a distress call, his communications officer reported. Looks like a Kresh merchant vessel under attack by raiders. Danny pulled up the tactical display. 3 pirate ships surrounded the merchant, firing on its shields. The merchant was outgunned and would be boarded within minutes. 6 months ago, this would have been someone else's problem. The Kresh would have called for help, and maybe by the time Council forces arrived, the pirates would be long gone. Not anymore. All ships, combat speed, weapons hot. Let's make this quick. The human patrol group dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly on top of the raiders. Danny opened a channel. Pirate vessels, this is Captain Danny Foster of the Human Defense Fleet. You have 10 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender. If you fire on us or if you harm that merchant ship, we will destroy you. The pirates were used to empty threats. They kept firing on the Kresh merchant. That was their last mistake. Danny's weapons officer didn't need to ask for permission. The rules of engagement were clear. The human ships opened fire, and 3 seconds later, the pirate vessels were debris. The Kresh merchant's captain sent a message filled with gratitude and relief. That's the 4th group this week, Danny's first officer commented. Word isn't spreading as fast as we thought. It will, Danny replied. Every pirate we destroy sends a message. Attack civilian vessels in our patrol zones and you die. Simple as that. This was humanity's new role in the galaxy. Not conquerors, not diplomats playing nice. They were the guardians, the enforcers, the species that would respond to any threat with overwhelming force. And slowly, grudgingly, the rest of the galaxy was accepting it. Dr. Henry Cole stood in a medical facility on a Delmar colony world, training their doctors in human medical techniques. The Delmar had been one of the few species to support humanity during the New Portland crisis, and humanity remembered its friends. This procedure will increase survival rates for trauma patients by about 40%, Henry explained, showing the Delmar physicians a technique developed on Earth's battlefields. It was designed for combat medicine, but it works just as well for accidents or natural disasters. A Delmar doctor examined the equipment with her specialized appendages. "This is remarkable, Dr. Cole. Why didn't you share this with us before?" Henry's smile was slightly sad. "Because we were trying not to scare you. Most of our medical advances came from treating injuries that should have been fatal. We got very good at saving people who were torn apart, crushed, or poisoned because those things happened all the time on Earth. Showing you the technology would have revealed just how dangerous our world really was." "And now?" the Delmar doctor asked. "Now everyone knows what Earth is like, so we might as well share everything we've learned from surviving it. Your people helped us when we needed it. This is how we say thank you." Similar exchanges were happening throughout the galaxy. Human agricultural techniques turned marginal colonies into thriving farms. Human engineering solved problems that had stumped alien scientists for decades. Human military tactics were studied by every species with an army. Humanity was no longer hiding what they were. And surprisingly, once the initial fear passed, most species found that having humanity as an ally was incredibly valuable. Commander Jake Morrison took a new position as the Galactic Council's security director. It was a role that had always been filled by rotating representatives from different species, a bureaucratic position with little real power. Jake changed that. His first action was to establish rapid response protocols. Never again would a colony be left undefended while politicians debated. Under Jake's system, any distress call from any council member world would receive an immediate military response. The fact that most of these rapid response forces were human was something nobody objected to anymore. His second action was to integrate human tactical doctrine into council forces. Alien soldiers trained alongside humans, learning to fight the way Deathworlders fought. It was brutal, exhausting, and effective. Casualties among council peacekeepers dropped by 70% in the first 3 months. Captain Lisa Matthews became the face of human diplomacy, traveling the galaxy to build alliances based on mutual respect rather than condescension. She visited worlds that had never seen a human before, showing them that humanity could be both strong and trustworthy. On a Metadrin colony ship, she addressed a gathering of their crystal elders. "Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy. We've seen what happens when powerful species try to dominate everyone else. It leads to resentment, rebellion, and eventually war. What we want is partnership. We'll provide security. You provide wisdom. Together, we build something better than what existed before." The Metadrin elder who spoke for the group resonated with a pattern that translated to careful consideration. "Your species has certainly proven its strength, Captain Matthews. But strength alone does not make a good leader." "You're right," Lisa agreed. "That's why we're not asking to lead. We're asking to serve. We'll be the shield that protects the galaxy from those who would threaten peace. But we need other species to be the conscience that keeps us from becoming the tyrants we destroyed." That message resonated throughout the galaxy. Humanity was offering a deal. They would provide security, enforce peace, and respond to threats. In exchange, other species would provide oversight, ensure humanity didn't abuse its power, and help maintain the moral framework that kept civilization functioning. It was a balance, delicate and new, but it worked. Ambassador Claire Hudson drafted the new charter over the course of 3 months. Working with representatives from every council species, it was signed in a ceremony aboard the same station where the council had once abandoned humanity. The charter enshrined the right of self-defense for all species. It established clear intervention protocols so no one would wonder if help was coming. It recognized humanity as a first-tier power with veto authority over security matters. But most importantly, it created oversight committees that could investigate any species, including humanity, if they abused their power. "This is not about humanity dominating the galaxy," Claire said in her speech at the signing ceremony. "This is about creating a system where power is balanced by responsibility. Humanity will enforce peace, but we will also be held accountable for how we do it. We will protect the weak, but we will also respect their sovereignty. We will respond to threats, but we will also show mercy when appropriate. This charter binds us to those principles." The document was signed by every species on the Council. Even the Vrex, diminished and humbled after their defeat, added their mark to the charter. A new age had begun. Admiral Karen Bell retired from active military service 6 months after New Portland. She had spent 30 years hiding humanity's true capabilities, and she was tired. But before she left, she gave one final speech to the graduating class at Earth's primary military academy. "You are the first generation that won't have to hide what you are," she told the young soldiers. "You won't have to pretend to be weak. You won't have to disguise your ships or lie about your capabilities. But that freedom comes with responsibility. The galaxy is afraid of us now. They've seen what we can do when we stop holding back. Your job is to prove that their fear is not justified, but their respect is. Be strong, be vigilant, be ready to fight when necessary, but also be wise enough to know when fighting isn't necessary. The galaxy is watching us. Show them that Deathworlders can be more than just dangerous. Show them we can be heroes." The transformation of galactic society continued gradually over the following years. Human technology spread to species that had helped during the crisis. Human advisors trained alien militaries in effective defense strategies. Human patrol groups kept trade routes safe and peaceful. But humanity also learned from other species. The Metadran taught them patience and long-term thinking. The Delmar shared their understanding of complex ecosystems. The Kresh demonstrated organizational techniques that humans had never considered. It became a true partnership, built not on the fiction of equality because species weren't equal, but on the reality of mutual benefit. Each species contributed what they were best at, and together they created something stronger than any single species could build alone. Lieutenant Amy Rogers took command of the New Portland Defense Force, staying at the colony she had helped liberate. The colonists rebuilt their homes around a memorial to those who had died in the Rex attack. Amy made sure every human child born on New Portland learned the story of what happened and why it mattered. "We fought because we had to," she told classes of students. "We revealed our true strength." 5 years had passed since Protocol Omega was activated. The galaxy that existed now bore little resemblance to the one that had abandoned humanity at New Portland. Commander Jake Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral, stood at the viewing window of Horizon's Gate Station and reflected on how much had changed. The station itself looked different. Where once there had been separate sections for each species, carefully divided and isolated, now there were mixed areas where aliens and humans worked side by side. A Kresh engineer calibrated sensors with a human technician. Delmar merchants discussed shipping routes with human traders. Even a few Vrex from the younger generation that had grown up after their species' humiliation served on station security alongside human officers. "Remembering when we first arrived here?" Captain Lisa Matthews asked, joining him at the window. Jake nodded. "I remember thinking we'd have to keep up the act forever," smiling, pretending to be weaker than we were, hiding everything that made us dangerous. "I hated every minute of it." "Do you think we did the right thing? Revealing ourselves the way we did?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I think New Portland forced our hand. But yes, I believe it was right. The galaxy needed to see us as we really are. They needed to understand that humanity wasn't going to be a victim anymore. And honestly, I think most species are relieved. They don't have to wonder what we're hiding anymore." A young lieutenant approached and saluted. "Admiral Morrison, Ambassador Hudson requests your presence in Conference Room 7. The Vrex delegation has arrived for the treaty renewal discussions." Jake thanked the lieutenant and headed toward the conference room, Lisa walking beside him. The Vrex treaty renewal was one of the most important diplomatic events of the year. After their crushing defeat at Darwin Nebula, the Vrex Dominion had been forced to accept harsh terms. Now, 5 years later, humanity was willing to ease some of those restrictions, but only if the Vrex proved they had truly changed. Ambassador Claire Hudson waited in the conference room with the Vrex delegation. Their leader was a younger Vrex named Kral Ven, who had been just a junior officer during the war. He rose when Jake entered, showing respect that would have been unthinkable from a Vrex 5 years ago. "Admiral Morrison, Captain Matthews, thank you for meeting with us, Kralven said through his translator. I know our species has given you little reason to trust us, but I hope to demonstrate that the Vrex Dominion has learned from our mistakes. The negotiations took most of the day. The Vrex wanted to reduce the demilitarized zone around human space, to regain the right to build larger warships, to be trusted with more autonomy. In exchange, they offered technology sharing, trade agreements, and most importantly, a formal apology for New Portland. My government understands that words alone cannot heal the wounds we inflicted, Kralven said solemnly. But we want you to know that what happened at New Portland is taught in every Vrex school now as an example of what not to do. We attacked civilians. We ignored warnings. We underestimated an opponent because we were arrogant. These are lessons our children learn so they will not repeat our failures. Claire studied the young Vrex carefully. She had negotiated with hundreds of aliens over the years and had become very good at reading them. Kralven seemed genuine, but she needed to be sure. Tell me about the memorial, she said quietly. Kralven's mandibles moved in what might have been embarrassment. The Dominion erected a memorial on our capital world. It lists the names of every human who died at New Portland. Below their names, it reads, they died because we chose pride over wisdom. We honor them by choosing differently now. Every Vrex military officer must visit this memorial before receiving their commission. Jake felt something shift inside him. The anger he had carried for 5 years, the rage that had fueled Protocol Omega, began to ease slightly. The Vrex weren't just making political gestures, they were genuinely trying to change. The treaty renewal will be approved, Jake said, but understand this. Humanity doesn't forget. We're willing to forgive, willing to build a new relationship with the Vrex Dominion, but we will always remember New Portland. If your species ever threatens human civilians again, there won't be negotiations. There won't be warnings. We will end you. Kralven met Jake's eyes without flinching. I understand, Admiral. And I believe my government understands as well. The Vrex Dominion does not want to be humanity's enemy. We want to be your ally. We want to earn that trust even if it takes generations. Dr. Henry Cole was giving a lecture at the Galactic Science Academy when he received the news about the Vrex treaty renewal. He smiled as he read the message, then returned his attention to the classroom full of alien students from a dozen different species. Today we're discussing evolutionary adaptation in extreme environments, Henry said, pulling up a holographic display of Earth. Humans evolved on what we now classify as a Class 12 death world. Everything on this planet was trying to kill us. The atmosphere was corrosive. The wildlife was aggressive. Even the plants were often poisonous. And yet not only did we survive, we thrived. A young Delmar student raised an appendage. Professor Cole, is it true that human children play games that simulate hunting and combat? Henry laughed. Absolutely true. We call them sports. Children chase each other, tackle each other, compete to throw objects accurately. We teach our young to be aggressive and competitive because on Earth, those traits meant survival. Other species might find it disturbing, but it's just how we evolved. Another student, this one Kresh, asked the question Henry had been waiting for. Professor, do you think humanity's violent nature makes them dangerous to the rest of the galaxy? Henry became serious. That's an important question. Yes, humanity is capable of tremendous violence. We evolved to be aggressive, territorial, and very good at warfare. But here's what many species don't understand. We also evolved intelligence, empathy, and the ability to control our aggressive instincts. Humans can be dangerous, but we choose not to be most of the time. That choice, that conscious decision to restrain our violent impulses, is what makes humanity good allies and neighbors. He pulled up footage from New Portland and Darwin Nebula, images that every being in the galaxy had seen by now. When humanity stopped restraining ourselves, this is what happened. We destroyed an entire Vrex fleet in 5 hours. We could have kept going. We could have invaded Vrex space, destroyed their worlds, made them extinct. But we didn't. We stopped when the threat was eliminated. That's the difference between a violent species and a dangerous one. Violent species attack because it's their nature. Dangerous species attack only when necessary, but when they do, they end the threat completely. The lecture continued, and Henry felt satisfaction in teaching the next generation of galactic scientists about humanity. Not the fiction of weak, friendly explorers, but the truth of strong, controlled Deathworlders who could be both terrifying and trustworthy. Captain Danny Foster was dealing with a very different kind of problem in his patrol sector. A new species had just achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the Galactic Council. The Teln were small, peaceful, and completely unprepared for the realities of galactic politics. Danny's ship, the Guardian, was assigned to escort a Teln delegation to their first council meeting. The Teln ambassador, whose name translated roughly as Quiet Song, was visibly nervous as she boarded the human vessel. "Ambassador Quiet Song, welcome aboard," Danny said warmly. "I know this must be overwhelming, but I promise we'll take good care of you." Quiet Song looked up at Danny with large, luminous eyes. Her species barely came up to a human's waist. "Captain Foster, I must confess that my people are somewhat frightened. We have heard stories about humanity, stories about the war with the Vrex, stories about how dangerous your species can be." Danny knelt down to be at eye level with the small alien. "Those stories are true. Humanity is dangerous, but we're not dangerous to species that treat us fairly. We're dangerous to pirates, to slavers, to anyone who attacks the innocent. Your people have nothing to fear from us. In fact, I'd like to think we'll become friends." Over the course of the journey to the council station, Danny and his crew showed the Teln delegation what humanity really was. They shared meals, explained human customs, and answered countless questions about Earth and human society. By the time they arrived at the station, Quiet Song's fear had been replaced by curiosity and cautious trust. At the council meeting, Quiet Song stood before the assembly and gave her species' first address. "The Teln are a small people from a gentle world. We have no armies, no weapons, no way to defend ourselves if threatened. When we learned of the Galactic Council, we were hopeful but also afraid. How could we survive in a galaxy that contained species so much more powerful than us?" She paused, looking at the various alien representatives. "But then we met humanity. We met Captain Foster and his crew. We learned about their strength, but also about their honor. And we realized something important. In this new galaxy, the strong do not always prey on the weak. Sometimes the strong protect the weak. That is the kind of galaxy we want to be part of. That is why the Teln request membership in the Galactic Council, and why we request humanity as our patron species." The request was approved unanimously. The Teln became the first